Welcome back to the Wine Crush. I'm Laura Lawson, and we are continuing upon our leisurely trek through this show, enjoying a glass of wine in one hand and a good book in the other. Well, our up-and-coming guest is definitely someone who can help us with both. We have Miss Ellen Crosby, and she is the author and creator of great books such as The Bordeaux Betrayal, The Merlot Murders, The Chardonnay Charade, and up-and-coming The Riesling Retribution. If nothing else, I like her alliteration. She's off to a great start. Well, at this point, Ellen, welcome to the Wine Crush.
Hi, Laura. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am outstanding today, and we're delighted to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, it's just fun to find someone who takes a different perspective on things. I think a lot of us get into wine and we take it too seriously, and we pick up The Speculator, and we pick up Robert Parker, and we pick up Janice Robison, and we read Michael Broadbent to the point where our eyes are crossed. You have no idea what a refreshing change it is to pick up a book that can educate me a little bit about wine, but also entertain me all the way along the way.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you.
Yes, I enjoyed you on vacation, so thank you very much for making my day very pleasant on the beach.
I've heard that before. I've been with people, yes, on vacation.
It probably would have gone better if I hadn't had the fourth glass of Chardonnay while trying to figure out the Jefferson book, but that was okay.
There you go. You were drinking the wrong wine for that book. You got to drink the cab.
I know. I got to pay attention. I've never been that good at following directions.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Well, I've got to ask you, for our listeners, Ellen Crosby, even though she writes these amazing wine books, is just pretty much a legend in everything she's been writing for her lifetime. And I encourage you, please do check her out at ellencrosby.com. But past that, I've got to ask you, why would you set such a great story? What made you decide to pick a winery in Virginia?
Well, actually, the story starts in London.
Okay.
I was living over there. My husband's a journalist. My husband's French, and we had lived in France for a while, and we always we drink French wine in our home. So we have this friend who's a huge Anglophile and lives in Virginia, where we now live. And he used to come over, and he always brought a bottle of Virginia wine every time he came to dinner at our house in London. And so when we came back to the United States on home leave, probably about a dozen years ago, he said, "Now we do the tour." And we'd never been to, sort of wine country in America. I actually hadn't been out to Napa. And I didn't really even know very much about Virginia, as a wine producing state. So he gave us this absolutely idyllic tour. And I got back to London and I was talking to my British literary agent because I had written a book about the time I lived in the Soviet Union, and she just thought the setting sounded really captivating, and she said, "You've got to write a book set in a vineyard." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about it." And she said, "You're a journalist. Do your homework and do it."
Figure it out.
So I said, I kept saying no, and she really pushed, and finally I said, "I'll write one." And I just signed a contract a few months ago for 5 and 6.
Oh, congratulations. I know I'm happy. That means I have 2 more to go.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, it's been sort of challenging because when you think you're only writing one and then all of a sudden you find yourself writing more, sort of my town is getting bigger and and I'm having to sort of rearrange things and redo things as I've had to sort of, my imagination's had to expand to fill more books. But it's been fun. It's been great because it's a real history-rich area, the part of Virginia where I've set my books, and there's just so much to write about. And people don't really know Virginia makes wine.
No, they don't. And when they do, they don't take it seriously. I will have to say your book, The Bordeaux Betrayal, is the one that, unfortunately, I picked that up first. I'm not great at reading in series.
Oh, lots of people don't. That's you're okay with that.
And for our listeners, we have had Mr. Benjamin Wallace on the show. He has
talked
Ben. About.
I was on a panel with him in the Indianapolis Book Festival in the spring. He's great.
He's wonderful. He's been a guest on the show a couple of times talking about Billionaire's Vinegar and, of course, following up to that. And in Bordeaux Betrayal, you do an exceptional job of actually tying in the true facts involved with the problem with Jefferson bottles and talking about ullage.
Thank you.
Who is your coach on all your wine facts?
It's sort of ironic that you would ask me. My original, the woman who helped me originally is a woman named Juanita Swedenborg, and I don't know if that name rings a bell with you.
It does, but I couldn't tell you why.
Well, she was sort of one of the pioneers of the Virginia wine industry, but she's also the woman who sued the state of New York when she found out she couldn't ship her wine across state lines. And New York didn't like that, so they sued back, and it went back and forth, and finally it ended up before the Supreme Court, and she won. And so that's probably where you've heard of her, because by that time she was in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Spectator and Financial Times and everything else, because this lawsuit got bigger and bigger and bigger as sort of a David versus Goliath story. And so Juanita, while all this was going on, I was dropping by her vineyard out in Middleburg, Virginia, and she was giving me this really fantastic education. And when we were working on the Bordeaux Betrayal, she had lost her husband by then, and she was in her 80s, and she just was really slowing down. And she passed away when we were in the middle of working on the book. And then someone who I actually met at her memorial service kind of stepped in, and he said, well, I couldn't possibly fill her shoes, but I'm happy to help you. And so I'm now working with a winemaker at a brand new Virginia winery, which is sort of the flip side of what's going on in Virginia, Barrel Oak Winery, which is a brand new place that's opened up, state-of-the-art, big, everything else. And so those, Rick Taggett, Barrel Oak Vineyard and Winery, and Juanita, when she was alive, were the two people who I call all the time, read my books, make sure I get it right, help me with the research and everything else. So,
well,
I've been very lucky.
I think that's great, and for our listeners, I think it should appeal to their sense of wanting to pick the books up because they know it's based on fact and based on someone's personal reminiscences as they're going over things.
Thank you.
Question for you, since you said you have 2 other books coming out, can we expect, something coming up about shipping concerns in one of your novels?
No, I think most of my books, basically, I would call them sort of mystery with history, because what I do is, this part of Virginia it's very rich with Civil War history. We also have, we do have Jefferson here, as you know, but the one I'm writing now, actually, we're not far from Washington D.C., and where I happen to live, it's in the Washington suburbs, and Middleburg, by the time you get out there, it's a little bit sort of the remote suburbs. But I moved the book to Washington, and there's always some history that you can tie in with wine, and so that one sort of explores actually the War of 1812 and the burning of Washington, and I've managed to tie it into wine.
Well, I'm going to have to keep my fingers crossed. I'm certainly looking forward to reading that. But for our listeners, I encourage you to read Miss Crosby's books. They're a great insight, both to wonderful mysteries and great wine.
Thank you.
Ellen, thank you for being part of the Crush, and hopefully we can have you back on when we get